There have been calls for years to hire more New York State forest rangers, but so far that proposal hasn't made its way into the state budget. And the irony is that the forest rangers that there are conducting a lot of rescues, and they're racking up thousands of dollars in overtime, money that could presumably be used to hire more rangers. Inside the debate over forest ranger overtime on today's Story of the Day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Pearsall Wealth Management at UBS Wealth Management USA, subsidiary UBS AG, member FINRA SIPC, 1 Broad Street, Glens Falls.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Monday, September 9th. First up, Governor Kathy Hochul has requested a federal major disaster declaration for parts of the North Country that were swamped by Tropical Storm Debby last month. Hochul says the declaration would provide federal funding for Essex, Franklin, Jefferson, and St. Lawrence counties, plus other parts of the state. It would provide federal reimbursement for debris removal, emergency protective measures, and repairs to public buildings, roads, and other infrastructure. The storm dropped more than 7 inches of rain in less than 12 hours in parts of St. Lawrence and Franklin counties, while causing power outages in Essex County. Hochul says the state and federal emergency management agency are working to assess damage. The governor says state grants of up to $50,000 are available meanwhile for home repairs not covered by private insurance or other disaster relief programs. The city of Plattsburgh's police chief will retire later this month. As Kara Chapman reports, it'll reopen a leadership gap in the department.
Peter Mitchell has been with the Plattsburgh Police Department for 25 years. Since last December, he served as interim police chief. City Mayor Chris Rosenquist says Mitchell became the department's permanent chief late last week. But last Friday afternoon, the mayor announced Mitchell had submitted his retirement paperwork. His last official day will be September 20th. Mitchell's appointment last year followed a 3-year period when the city didn't have an active permanent police chief. Former Chief Levi Ritter was placed on administrative leave in December 2020, 2 months after he was named in an excessive use of force lawsuit. He resigned in April 2021. Mayor Rosenquist tried unsuccessfully to replace him with an external hire. Later, a former Warren County sheriff held an interim leadership role for more than a year. Mitchell's retirement means the city will once again be without a permanent police chief. Rosenquist said it's untenable to allow the position to be vacant. In a memo, he said the department will now be led by Lieutenant Josh Pond, the highest-ranking officer. In the near future, the mayor wants 3 active lieutenants to oversee the department's administration, patrol, and detective divisions. Rosenquist decided not to seek a second term and will be stepping down at the end of this year. He says he's reached out to both the candidates running to replace him to discuss next steps for finding a new chief. Kara Chapman, North Country Public Radio.
The locks that connect Lower Saranac Lake with Osita Lake will be closed for emergency repairs all day tomorrow. According to the Department of Environmental Conservation, the hand-operated lock mechanism is broken and needs to be fixed. The channel between Second Pond and Osita Lake is just outside the village of Saranac Lake. It's a popular spot for boaters and includes the launch for the Saranac Island State Campground. The DEC says the hand carry trail around the locks for canoes and kayaks will be open tomorrow. Adirondack Forest Rangers respond to search and rescues at all hours of the day and night. That means they can end up working a lot of overtime. According to the Adirondack Explorer, the state has paid out millions of dollars in overtime to rangers around the state in recent years. Gwendolyn Craig has been reporting on the issue for the Explorer, and she spoke with Emily Russell about the extra hours that rangers work and the other stressors they deal with on the job.
Forest rangers have your typical work week supposedly, but the thing is they're really the search and rescue front for the Adirondack Park. And when you have 6 million acres you're patrolling, that's a lot of ground for a relatively small number of people to cover. And typically what we're seeing is their overtime starts racking up on these search and rescue missions. And when you have people of all hiking abilities going out at different times of day, prepared or unprepared. Some just unfortunately have accidents. Others are woefully unprepared and find out the hard way. So that's where you start to see a lot of these rangers racking up some significant hours and some very long stretches of work.
Yeah. Yeah. In your reporting, you talk about a ranger in the Newcomb area Scott Sabo, who worked 72 hours over 5 days, which is just amazing. Another ranger you talked to, who's a union delegate, Rob Projacolo, earned more than $234,000 over the last 5 years in overtime. So can you just talk about like his mindset when it comes to work and being a ranger and responding to calls?
So Rob Projacolo in particular is one of a few rangers across the state that really has a significant amount of training to lead some of these major rescues. He is extremely devoted to his job. I think all rangers are. I think a lot of them, when I spoke to them about the overtime numbers, were not so concerned about them, but they were telling me that did wish there was some sort of on-call system, because there's this feeling that they have to be ready for a rescue at any point, at any time of day. And it can be really hard to feel like, you don't respond to something because you could be leaving a fellow ranger in the lurch, or you could be the person to find somebody who's lost. It's a difficult situation they face.
Yeah. There's so much that goes into this issue. As you say, some of them do like to be able to earn that overtime money, but I imagine it gets to a point where like you've worked so much that actually answering those calls is no longer a safe thing to do because you're not well enough rested, or you don't have the gear that you need. Like your boots aren't even dry. So like beyond just kind of the overtime demand, what were some of the issues that rangers talked about where they feel like there are shortcomings in terms of resources?
Well, one thing we're hearing from rangers, and you've reported on this, the Forest Ranger Foundation, they're really concerned about a lack of equipment, especially for winter rescues. And I mean, even in one of the main rescue we wrote about in this story at the start of this winter kind of conveyor belt of rescues that happened, Rob Projacolo was saying he was having to like lend out some of his own winter equipment to some of the newer forest rangers because they weren't properly attired. And I think, the state is aware that there can be sort of a backlog or a stopgap of some kind with equipment purchasing, but they have been trying to work on it. And then the Forest Ranger Foundation has been stepping in to try and fill that gap. But there's definitely some tension between the state and the rangers over just some of the ways that the resources that they have in these major responses.
So what has the state's response been to specifically the issue of staffing and overtime? Because as you reported, there are fewer forest rangers now out there than there were a couple of years ago. And the state has enrolled just 11 forest rangers in the current academy. That's down in recent years. So what does the state say it's doing in response to high overtime levels and the current staffing levels?
So we spoke with both former DEC Commissioner Basil Sagos and the current interim Commissioner Sean Mahar about this issue. And Sean Mahar, he pointed out that they have created a civil service exam that's going to be going on this month for forest rangers. So they're still, committed to trying to keep the academies going. What was interesting about talking to Basil Sagos, who's often the head of DEC, going to these budget hearings each year to say that, whether or not they have enough staff, and he's usually there to say they do have enough staff, to lawmakers, he was telling me on his very last day as commissioner that, he felt that behind the scenes, he was always advocating for more staff. And he pointed to a 38 Ranger Academy in 2022. But, where the Ranger Academy already had at least 2 people drop out at the end of May. So that's why we're down to 11. The other thing, the civil service exam is supposedly supposed to be online now. So that's supposed to attract possibly some more candidates. So they are aware that they would like to see more people applying to these jobs.
That was Gwendolyn Craig from the Adirondack Explorer speaking with Emily Russell. You can read more of Craig's reporting on forest rangers in the latest edition of the Explorer magazine. Music today by Christopher Watts of Canton and the Wickmore Jazz Trio of Plattsburgh. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.